Man lunges in front of a car. An elderly woman silently drowns herself. Corpse sits up in its coffin and speaks. On this reservation, not all is what it seems. So the book we're going to talk about today is called Indian Burial Ground by Nick Medina. And I had read one other of his books prior called Sisters of the Lost Nation, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. I have a standalone review for that I will link down below. That one is about Indigenous women who have gone missing. Just has a whole, like, very haunting story that calls a light to that subject matter. And it's a great book. And I would highly recommend that one. But today we're going to talk about his newest, Indian Burial Ground. And it follows the story of, well, I would say there's two main characters. Noemi is the younger main character, and then there's Uncle Louie. You come into the story, and Noemi is at her trailer at home, and there's a knock on the door, and she opens the door, and it's her Uncle Louie, who she hasn't seen him forever. And, like, when she was growing up, he pretty much half raised her and took care of her. But then he left around the time she was 5 years old because he wanted to get off the reservation and do something with himself and not get stuck in some of the BS that a lot of people who grow up on the reservation would get stuck in that he saw. And so he went on to become a professor, and he is a teacher, and he teaches folklore and mythology. So he comes back home. At first she doesn't recognize him, but then she's like, Uncle Louie. He comes in. Her mom's there as well. She lives with her mom, and she is around 40 years old, has a boyfriend who's like this newscaster guy named Roddy. They're all kind of, having a reunion. They just haven't seen each other forever. All of a sudden, one of the, he was a former police chief. I don't think he was a current police chief, but he comes to their house, this guy, the chief, name's Luke Fisher, and he tells them, unfortunately, that she finds out that her boyfriend was killed by a car crash. Well, the weird thing was, it seems like he jumped out in front of the car, which she didn't know why he would do that, and it was pretty messed up. She goes into shock, basically, like, not believing this could possibly be true. And there's the stages of grief, and you go through, like, denial, and then anger, and sadness, and you have all these emotions going on. And, like, throughout the book, she goes through all of these all of these different emotions. What's weird is all of a sudden at the same time, like, strange stuff seems to be happening. And then it kind of also is tied back to back in the day, her Uncle Louie. A bunch of stuff kind of similar to this happened, where this would seem like this evil spirit kind of got into people and caused a lot of chaotic things to happen. Like, when Uncle Louie was growing up, there was like 3 bodies that were dug up from the graveyard, and someone took their bones, and there was someone drowning themselves. But, like, each of these weird occurrences, the people who saw the stuff happen are like, yeah, the person that drowned themselves, it was like a game to them, and they were smiling while they were running, and they tried to pull me in there, and they seemed like they were possessed. People sitting up when they were dead and speaking, but then they take them back to the hospital, and it's like, no, they're still dead. So some really effed up stuff's happening. It's super creepy, and it's super weird, and it's a very emotional journey. I really like the way Nick Medina writes. You get a lot of the Native American culture, which is awesome, and then a lot of the mythos and stories that they had been told growing up in their different families, and just life on the reservation, and some of the stuff that happened. And it was a really heartfelt, weird, just really good book. When you're flipping between the timelines, I think it's like the 80s when Uncle Louie was a teenager, maybe like 16 or 17, and he would be taking care of Noemi when she was growing up. There was all this weird stuff that happened, like, when he was a kid. Like, there was this kid who died. There was this whole rumor about the Dakota vampire. And so they thought that, the kids at least thought that there was this vampire that was possibly killing people. And then they had all this stuff about people saying, like, oh, if someone's throwing rocks at your windows at night, that means if you look out and you see someone or something, that the Dakota vampire is going to come get you. And they thought that this Dakota vampire had gone and killed this kid. And so I think Louis went over to the wake when everyone was there. And when he's going to go into the house where they're having the wake for Aubrey, he sees this like rattlesnake, but the rattlesnake's dead outside the door. He doesn't think much of it, but then everyone all of a sudden starts like running outside of the house and like flipping out because apparently this Aubrey person sat up and spoke. And they don't really say what they said, but that was really weird. And then he looks back to where that rattlesnake was. The rattlesnake's gone. Like it was some kind of weird omen or something. And then after this wake too, he goes back home and there's this trailer across the way. And in this trailer there's this guy named Ern who lives there. He's in his 30s and he lives with this woman, Miss Shelby, who is his mother, and Ern is like 600 pounds and he can't leave the trailer, so she takes care of him. But he's like, hey, my mom, she went over to Aubrey's wake and then never came back home. And so all of a sudden the mom is missing. Louis, like, once in a while, like, goes back and talks to Ern to, like, let him know if he knows anything or what's happening and what's going on. So that lady's missing too. So you have that after that weird occurrence happened. So they don't know if she was taken or what happened, if she fell into the river. So you have all these different occurrences of a drowning, of there was another thing that happened with a child where the child ends up dying in a really horrific way, but the child like ran right into it. Seemed like they were embracing death, like barely even made a noise when it happened. And so all this weird stuff happened, like a spirit was unleashed, and one of the elders of the tribe is thinks it's due to like an unbalance or something that's unbalanced them and is unleashed something. So they have to kind of figure out what this evil is that's been unleashed. And it's kind of a crazy story. And then it ties back in with Noemi in current times with what happened with her boyfriend, that they're saying it's a suicide and he ran out in front of the car, and she's like, why would he even do that? And so, you know, she starts messaging his sister, like trying to find out like if there's anything she didn't know or what was going on, and she finds out that like he had been on antidepressants, but she didn't know that. And so signs are pointing, oh, maybe he was depressed, but then again, like weird stuff starts happening in like the same vein of how it did when Uncle Louis's day, and like those timelines are kind of merging. And so it's just a really interesting story. It's weird, it's creepy, and I highly enjoyed it. If that sounds interesting to you, Indian Burial Ground by Nick Medina might just be for you. And if you're interested in hearing about that book I was mentioning earlier, Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina, that will be the next video coming up, so stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.